Malcolm Hoenlein is with us live via telephone. We call this a weekly update, Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations. Mr. Hoenlein, a pleasure to welcome you back to JM in the AM.
Thank you. It's good to be with you. And this is really eventful hours, minutes, days. It's incredible how much is going on.
It's pretty remarkable. Last Friday we spoke, and obviously no one knew for sure exactly what was going to happen. And then I would think the majority of American Jewry found out Shabbos morning one way or the other, wink, wink, about the news and what had happened. And sure enough, the war started with a real bang, to say the least. What could you tell us about that part of it first, about this unbelievable effort that resulted in the assassination of tens of leaders in Iran, including, of course, Khamenei himself?
Well, we'll find out in due time whether this was an arranged meeting again, like some of the meetings were during the previous conflicts, and the ability to pinpoint people. If you remember, although today it's already eclipsed the amazing pager and other events that took place in past conflicts that were remarkable. Obviously, the intelligence was amazing, both by the CIA and by Israel Mossad and others. The fact that in the first hour or so you eliminated Khamenei and many of the top leaders, I think they're down to the third or fourth level of leaders in many of the succession patterns that have been created. The preciseness of the attacks. I mean, you think about 200 Israeli planes were in the air. I mean, it's a little country, had 200 planes in the air, and America had more than 200 planes in the air. And yet they coordinated. They were flying often in Tehran or in similar areas, that it was all worked out so that there was not one incident. There wasn't one plane knocked down, you have to think about it. Just in the law of averages, it's incredible. And unfortunately, the friendly fire from in Kuwait that took down the several American planes, but the pilots were all saved. So with the minimal number of deaths of Israeli and American service people, a few deaths on the ground in Israel, it's tragic, no matter how many. It's really an astonishing thing. And as one expert told me, he said, there will be 1,000 books written on this, on the campaign so far, and on all the things that took place, how the deception up to the day of the event. I honestly got advance notice, not because purposely, but I have a friend who's in a running group that runs 3 mornings a week, including Saturday mornings in Israel at 5 a.m. And one of the members is a pilot, and he sent out before Shabbos in Israel.
He won't be in the running group. That's hilarious.
Saying, I don't think we should run. I don't think it's a good idea for us to have running tomorrow morning. And the person just told it to me nonchalantly. He said, look at this strange thing. I said, bingo, that's it. That's the strongest message. With all the things that leaders told me, and everybody, had predictions and timing, and that to me was the dead giveaway.
Yeah, so you were one of those people that had information Shabbos morning. Let's start with this order of succession. I mean, we talk about the potential for regime change, and we know what the president's goal is in terms of that. He wishes it happened as easily as Venezuela's did. But, I mean, once you eliminate 30 or 40, it seems like there's plenty of people that, immediately replace those who've been, who've already been killed. And I'm wondering just, how deep does the bench go? How large is this order of succession? And will regime change be that much harder because there's plenty of hardliners still available?
So there's multiple questions, and the answer is basically yes. They too prepare levels of succession. The Ayatollah had named his son, and we have discussed this, that this was not a surprise that he named his son as successor, but the toll is great. First of all, you're not replacing people with the same level of experience when you eliminate leaders. Second, there's no more coordination. So people attribute some of this to the firing, for instance, into Azerbaijan yesterday. It could have been that just the leader in the Azeri section, the area adjacent to Azerbaijan, decided that if they were attacking everywhere else, they were going to shoot into to the Air Force base there. Every time they fired, and we can discuss it, this has profound impact. It could have a longer impact in terms of how a lot of countries view their future relationship with Israel.
Right. In other words, when they fire at any country other than Israel, you mean?
When they're firing at any other country, and Israel's ability to withstand this challenge. A lot of them bought into the threats that the Ayatollah and others made, that we are going to wipe them off the first day. We'll destroy them, the United States, the whole American presence. Why they attacked the states, we don't know. Maybe it's because they were going after communications systems. Maybe, and they hit a lot, like in Qatar, a very important communication center, $1 billion building. In other places, they have longstanding resentments, but it seems UAE, I think, took more hits than Israel did.
Yeah.
And that's because they were seen as the closest to the U.S. and to Israel. But Saudi Arabia took the hits, and they had been working to develop a relationship over the recent years. And Saudi Arabia have made statements and other things that were more critical and hostile, causing concern, and also taken on, as I described it the week before, bombing the UAE in material that they sent to Yemen. I think that there is, there are a lot of questions that arise from this about what was the decision-making process. Why did they decide to broaden the conflict, knowing that you're just alienating more forces?
Right, but this was part of their threat in advance, right? This was part of their threat in advance.
It was. Right. It was. And they're not doing stuff that destroys the country. I mean, they're doing damage. They did considerable damage in Bahrain and into major buildings in the UAE, but not destroying the country. They're not taking it over. There's no long-term gain. If the focus should have been, if you would think, on Israel, on American shipping, on the American presence. We wiped out their whole navy.
Right. Coming in, their supply was depleted to the point where they probably were relying on the UAE to get Trump to stop, right? I'm assuming that was the reason.
Well, they wanted to put pressure on it, but this could be the sign of a disjuncted leadership, on one hand. Right. Second of all, that they had specific targets that they chose because they thought they would intimidate and keep them from joining. Third, they drove the British, the cowardly British and the cowardly French and all of the others into having to have a presence there. When you remember, I talked about the presence of the Charles de Gaulle a week ago. Now you see that it moved to the Mediterranean, and the British also, and to attack Cyprus, which is really ridiculous because it forced the British hand as well. So if you're looking for a rational, we have to see later, when a lot of the information will come out about what the internal process or lack thereof. There have been maybe directives, and the individual guys are now acting on those directives. There isn't the kind of centralized coordination that you would have had all the leadership remained in place.
Right. There have been some tragedies in Israel, obviously. I mean, the family in Beit Shemesh is just unfathomable.
It's awful.
But
awful.
Terribly awful. But in addition to that, it seems, from this vantage point, it seems like, I don't know if it's the Israeli media or I don't know how it works, what reports come from where. I think just if you calculate everything that's been happening since Shabbos, the damage to Israel has been more extensive than reported. Would you agree with that? Every time a building was hit, every time a facility was hit, it seems like it displaced people and families, around that area. It's not just the one building it hits, but the others are unoccupiable as well. So is there more loss, even if it's property loss? Is there more loss to Israel than is being reported? I mean, I saw a figure that over 1,000 people have been taken to hospitals with injuries. That's something we really haven't seen in the press.
The answer is absolutely. And if you see some of the missiles that hit in areas like Bnei Brak, especially the more concentrated areas, a whole block of buildings could be affected. Not one, two, but a whole. If you look at pictures and get the reports, the windows knocked out, buildings had to be taken down. The difference is that Israel moves immediately. When a building is hit and is clearly unstable, they take it down.
Yeah.
Now, you have to think that the people who live there lost everything. Yep. I mean, literally everything. It's nothing you can go and reclaim when you knock down a building like that. So all their personal belongings and stuff was lost. So the number of buildings, I know in Tel Aviv, early on, they were already saying that 20 buildings have been damaged and most destroyed or had to be destroyed. So, there obviously you have the attacks now coming from Hezbollah in the north, where you don't have the same kind of warning. The amazing system from Iran is that you get the advance warning telling you that you're going to get the warning so you can prepare, and then you get the notice when it's actually the missile is within striking distance. So people had enough time to get to shelters and to protect themselves. The people who were killed, there was only one where they were in the shelter because it took a direct hit.
Yeah.
The shelters can protect, but it's very hard to protect against a direct hit no matter what you do, unless you build them underground, and even there it's probably can be penetrated.
Did Iron Dome suffer in terms of, I hate to put this in statistics, but were there percentages of foiled attempts down, or were they just simply overwhelmed because in the first day of the attack, the number of rockets was completely overwhelming?
They get overwhelmed, and the ability to take it out. As you know, that this time the laser was used in the north and is being used in the north. There, it cost a few dollars to do a shot. Each shot of the Iron Dome is $100,000. It's used to save lives, and Israel doesn't skimp on that ground. But yes, the system gets overwhelmed. They were shooting between 9 and 31 rockets at certain times. But they would do a big batch, and then it would be quiet for hours, and then they would do another big batch. Then they shifted to the strategy of doing a small number, but doing them constantly, much more frequently. Right. So people on one night, I know, were 4 times in and out of the shelters in the Tel Aviv area.
Yeah, it's getting a little bit quieter. We'll talk about up north in a minute, but first, now I lost my train of thought, of course. All right, let's go up north. Last night was a quiet night in general. I shouldn't say quiet because there were sirens, but relatively quiet night compared to the nights before in Israel. But up north, there was plenty of rockets last night. Hezbollah decided to enter into this war. What kind of decision was that? What do you think went into that? And what do you think Israel's eventual goal is in terms of Hezbollah in Lebanon?
Well, they want to drive them out. They want to take away their capacity to fire anything. They have reduced it greatly. I think it's remarkable that the Lebanese government has come out as strongly as they have. And the verbal condemnations by the leadership, I think, was very strong. And I think maybe this red line is being drawn in the sand finally in Lebanon. We've seen progress towards that, but where they're outlawing essentially them having weapons, Hezbollah having weapons, and taking other steps that would empower them to be able to act. Now, what question is, will they execute? That's still a very big question mark. But the fact is that they're mobilizing against it. And when you listen to some of the interviews where the people used to always condemn Israel, they're not doing it this time. They're condemning Hezbollah and saying that they dragged us into this. Even people were displaced from their homes in the north. And Israel gave advance warning and to 53 villages, towns, for people to evacuate to save their lives. I mean, to protect them. Nobody was giving Israelis advance notice, and there is damage in the north as well. And it's also psychological damage. You know, people who were displaced who finally came back, hesitant to do so.
And it adds a front to the whole effort. You know, every time another front is added, you know how difficult that is for Israel.
And you know, they're shooting whatever they have left. I don't think that they have vast stockpiles. You notice the Syrian border has been quiet. And in general, the Gaza was quiet, not because they probably don't have any rockets to fire, right, but there are always some there. But the fact is that there was a choice not to heat up the borders. And the fact that, Jordan came under attack and that you had American planes stationed there, again, more quiet than what I anticipated. I think Israel's work over the last year in the Shtachim, and especially going in and destroying the manufacturing of weapons, capturing a lot of weapons, going after the people responsible. As you know, there have been daily efforts going in there and having to do this. I think it prevented that front from being more active. Yeah. And, you got to look at the cumulative record to see where the power lies, what the decisions were. Again, Hezbollah is also suffering from the decision-maker absence. And
yeah, but there we don't care about regime change.
Well, we have had regime change, sort of.
I get it, but here it's like an ultimatum. It's like President Trump is holding it up as an ultimatum.
No, you mean compared to Iran?
Yeah.
So that's a completely different story, and we have to see. I mean, the fact that Mujtaba is alive, supposedly. First of all, you can't tell anymore who's really alive or not because of the AI. They showed the pictures of Ahmadinejad attending the funeral of his bodyguards, but you don't know, is this really Ahmadinejad or not, because everything with AI can be fake. But if the fact that they survived and Mujtaba was also reported to have been killed in that initial strike, he did survive. Right. Mujtaba is not wanted by the people, not even by the leadership. He was designated by his father, and I've had a lot of interaction in these things. Know a little bit about the inside story. He is completely disrespected, both as an Islamic scholar and as a leader. He never did anything of any significance, and he was in hiding much of the time. So I think this is just a temporary maneuver, or maybe they're setting him up to be the next in line. And nobody wants to put themselves forward because they know you're just setting yourselves up for some sort of a creative attack. Yes. So they're happy to sacrifice him by making him the leader.
Understood. It's America's one and only Jewish Moments in the Morning radio program, heard on listeners-sponsored digital radio, rather well the web at NachumSegal.com and the Nachum Segal Network, and of course the beloved NSN app. You were finishing the point. I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying so. I think that this is still a process in play. Right. That there are other people now whose names are being put forward as potential successors, and you see the president saying that he wants to have a say in it, and then they attack him for regime change. Well, having a say in this is essential because you don't invest all of this just to have a government that's going to recreate the same problems thereafter. We want people committed to dismantling completely the nuclear program, turning over the enriched uranium, stopping the ballistic missile program, and really focus on rebuilding a country and serving the needs of the people.
And I really wonder what the population Iran is 100 million people. I really wonder what the population wants. I mean, if you put it to a real vote, because you see plenty of demonstrations on the street, at the funerals, etc., of those who are, for the current regime, or the most recent regime, I would say. And then, of course, we keep hearing about demonstrations and students and, revolutionaries and Democrats, et cetera, small d, who want change. I really wonder what the real what a real poll would show us? Any clue?
So yes, because there's been studies been done, and I've seen the results, and over a period of time. So it's not just a snapshot of a particular second and moment in time. The fact is that probably 10 to 15% of the people support the regime. But remember, you're talking about a country of 90 to 95 million people. So 10% is 9.5 million people. 15% is almost 15 million people.
Right.
It's a lot of people yet, so that they can turn out and demonstrate. And most people don't go to demonstrations, and many of them are afraid still to go to demonstrations. Right. But we know that remember that 50% almost of the country is not Persians, they're not Farsi, they are 30 million Azeris, 12 million or 14 million Baluchis, you have Arabs, Ahwaz Arabs, you have all of the other groups that make up almost half the population, and it's very different there. And we've seen an attempted crackdown there in those areas. But most significant is what's happening in the Kurdish areas, where Kurds are being armed, coming in from Iraq.
Are they a large enough force to make an impact?
Well, I don't think they can defeat the Revolutionary Guard and the army, who, by the way, are not working together. I mean, they've always been in competition with one another. You see what's happened with the Navy, the fact that it's completely obliterated. That the Kurds are very devoted fighters, very capable. If they got the weapons from the West that they should get, that the people should be armed, because the real change will come, I think, from the people, and not just from quiet demonstrations, but having to be able to withstand the deadly forces of the Basij, who kill wantonly. I think there will be less and less of that activity, because they're getting the message that they're being, the people take pictures of the Basij and tell them that we know where you live and we will be there to take care of it, or send messages to their parents to warn them that they know. So it intimidates a lot of the Basij guys, and therefore they moved them from city to city. There are forces that are loyal, and they remain loyal. We have to see how that will break down, and we're only in day 6 or day 7. You got to give this thing a chance.
This is not, and that was the point I lost earlier. Even with all the devastation in Iran, this is not going to be a 12-day war, I would assume.
It won't be. It could be. I mean, if the regime collapses and they just stop, but I don't see that now. It doesn't have to be. It's not going to be a forever war. It doesn't have to be. We have to have in place some succession, and the people talk about Raza Pahlavi, the son of the former Shah, but there are a lot of people who oppose him. It could be a collective leadership, both representing the various ethnic groups, regions, and the main area, the main population. There are various things that are being contemplated. You see, there are meetings of councils of representatives of dissident groups. But I want to go back to your original question, because we know that the vast majority, 80% of people in different polls said they wanted relationships with Israel. Right. And up to 90% in polls say they reject the government, meaning they reject also the subjugation of women and the terrible circumstances and the murders, the thousands of executions every year, the fear and intimidation. The stories will only be told once there's more freedom to tell it, about how many young people were really killed, in January and during other periods where people just disappeared and you don't know where they are. So I think the vast majority want change. They want their lives, because their currency is worthless. Jobs were not there. The living conditions deteriorated in a wealthy country. So it could change, the balance also. Russia and China's role there, and the oil that they get, seeing the oil being shipped to other places. China will make it up. But for the Russians, this is very important, because they were selling the sanctioned oil for Russia.
Right. And they've all been pretty quiet, you would say, over the last week, China, Russia, others? They've been pretty...
Remarkably, and you haven't seen any Navy deployments. They used to do every time there was a challenge, they would do joint exercises. They did multiple ones with Russia and Chinese navies, even in this past year. Nothing, no presence to speak of, and also their regional allies. If anybody who wanted to remain neutral is not neutral anymore because they were all attacked. 11 countries were attacked by Iran.
Well, I mean, if everyone is going to stay, if these countries are going to stay at their level of silence, and they, the UAE and others, are going to continue being targets of Iran. I mean, one of the things we learned from this is something that you've said all the time, and that is the majority of the countries, especially in that area, want Iran dealt with. And it's funny because I don't think North Korea is viewed that way. I don't think other, rogue nations are viewed that way. But for some reason, no one wants to tolerate what the future of Iran has to offer.
And I think, and this is speculative, obviously, but I think that the post-war position of Israel in the region could be very different. The fact that Qatar and others see that there's only one local power and only one world power that stands up, and that if you want to be secure in the future, you should be an ally of the United States and at least not an enemy of Israel. It might pave the way for, better deal in Gaza. I hope it will lead to better arrangements in Syria, and the glorification of Shara will become more real, come down to reality, and that the Druze and the Kurds will be protected, and that we can do more to influence the situation, and certainly to see Lebanon stabilized would be, it can go back to close to what it was in the era of the good fence. These would be amazingly life-changing developments for Israel. And if the West and the gutless Europeans and others would all get into this, we could try to create to everybody's benefit. It's not, Israel has no designs on anybody for anything. That's the amazing thing. United States not fighting for any territory. They're fighting just to remain and to have peaceful solution and to stop the threats.
But isn't all this less likely the longer the war goes on, or not necessarily?
Not necessarily, because I don't see the rallies increasing inside, and the messages that I get from inside Iran do not indicate, people aren't saying end it. They're saying go for it, destroy this regime. And more and more in the region now are saying it because they saw what they're really about, that they would attack wantonly these targets. And clearly they had them earmarked before. They didn't just decide that day to pick up in sites in 11 countries to attack.
Yeah.
And so people get to see what the real regime is, and I think the celebrations, people feel free to celebrate. You'll see even more. They've done very courageous things in speaking up, and again, 1 week into a war with no boots on the ground, just by air power and very clever and brilliantly executed exercises. This is astonishing.
Yeah. And give me a second to make this point, because obviously if you think there's no imperialistic notion to this whole thing, you haven't been listening to Tucker Carlson. And the reason I say that sarcastically is because I had an interesting encounter this morning. More people would say it was the middle of the night. That's how early I was heading to the office this morning. And I stopped to pick something up, and someone stops me in the parking lot and says, I never thought I would openly say this to a Jew. And they went on basically to give me the whole rhetoric of people like Tucker and Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes, et cetera. I mean, I said to them, who have you been listening to? Which political commentators do you listen to? And the answer was all of them, at which point I knew who they're. And I'll tell you the difference, Malcolm. I'll tell you the difference in my opinion, and I need you to comment on this. It used to be that even if someone believed this and went along with the Chabad conspiracy theories, they would never repeat it, and they would never dare, go ahead and say it to a Jew, as this gentleman, pointed out to me in his preamble. But today, with the justification of these political and social commentators, with them spewing what they're spewing, all of a sudden, the average person has no problem establishing the same point of view. And I think that's a very big difference right now.
Look, the mayor of New York said it, talked about it, the war of aggression, et cetera. So one is, you're absolutely right. We cannot dismiss the impact that these know-nothings, to see some of Candace Owens, historical references and stuff that showed she knows absolutely nothing. I think that you raised something that I think is very important. I think the attack on Chabad is of a different quality than all the other things that were said, because they put a bullseye on every Chabad guy.
Right.
And I believe Chabad should sue immediately, cut Tucker Carlson, not let him, issue some nandy-pandy apology, because they have been identified. And you can identify the Chabad guys. And remember, they work in Muslim countries. They work in Africa. They work all over the world. They're certainly vulnerable. They don't have, security forces like Tucker Carlson and all these other people hire for themselves and have. You have to think about how vulnerable it is. And I think, and I've spoken to some lawyers yesterday about it just to sound them out. I think it's the perfect, of all the attacks, this is by far the strongest case. And if anything would intimidate you, remember he made the comments about President Herzog,
right,
and had to back down and apologize right away, because he realized that he could be sued. I think that, I'm not a lawyer, but I think that this is certainly something that the lawyers, and I hope Chabad will move immediately before he gives, tries to wimp out. But you're right. It's the fact that had somebody said the things beyond just saying we disagree with the war. Okay, people could disagree or agree that about an attack or not. But that's not what this is. This is character assassination of the Jewish people, of the Jewish nation, even of the president and others, but endangering Jews, because they're inciting the population, but not just here. It's in Europe, and it's everywhere else where they're quoted. And, and this goofy guy, laughs everything off, Tucker Carlson. And he has impact. He has direct access to the vice president. He has access to his son works in the vice president's office. These are not people who are disconnected and, who can be dismissed. This is a different kind of game. And look how long, Nachum, we warned about this, about what was going on the internet, all the research in groups like NCRI and Vine and Fig, and all those that are finally creating the expertise to really be able to go after this and to counter this is a front that we've never had to fight. We fought propaganda wars by the Nazis, by the Russians, by others. They invested lots of money, but here you're talking about when Qatar pours $1 billion into campaigns and hundreds of millions together with others into all these campaigns, the Chinese, others, they carry out their war and their differences with the United States or with Israel by fighting on our campuses, by creating dangerous situations that people feel that striking out at Jews is legitimate. I think that the muted response now, in general, here in New York and elsewhere, is a message that, first of all, people don't feel towards Iran and towards the Ayatollah, the way they felt, let's say, on Gaza. They didn't mobilize them in the same way, and they came under attack. The people who were sponsoring many of these activities. So it's a very different situation, but people should not dismiss it. The other thing I would say is I don't think we should take him on. And Candice, I don't think we should respond to them. The more we feed them oxygen, the more that they platform, the more that they feel that they're impacting. But there's a difference between that and filing an effective lawsuit. So the lawsuits in the universities here have had an impact. I think that Tucker Carlson being hit by a real suit that would be costly for him would be a very valuable development.
They've normalized propaganda. I think that's why God wanted me to have that encounter in the middle of the night, because I see a regular New Jersey resident is ready to speak out and say stuff they admitted they would never have said in the past.
They normalize hate. It's not just the propaganda; it's the hate, the messages. And don't think this is going to go away. If tomorrow there's a ceasefire, this stuff is entrenched, and you have a whole generation that is willing to buy it. And you see the races around the country where members of Congress who took support from the Jewish community and from AIPAC are now running against AIPAC. Not just that they're running against their opponents. And it's not one case, two cases, it's many, many. And how many people are running in openly hostile running openly hostile campaigns against Jews and against Israel? And when you look at the cumulative numbers, it's serious,
including in states like Florida,
including in Florida, and that the fact that young people still will vote for some of these guys, and we have young evangelicals that we have to do much more with. They're not reflecting the same patterns as their parents. Young. And even, unfortunately, some in the Jewish community, we have a job to do.
Unbelievable, I'll tell you. I'm sure someone like you who's been through so many of these battles didn't think you'd have to start from scratch with this one.
But we have really amazing people doing extremely creative stuff and beginning to develop the capacity for us to know, to get real hard information. The brilliant guys at Network Contagion Research Institute at Vine and Fig, and there are about 150 organizations that have been created since October 7th, maybe more. And some of them are really doing great work and getting out creative messaging. And I think you will see that it'll become much more professional, and it's not coming often from the traditional Jewish organizations. These are startups, often young people themselves who did it, and people who are just frustrated with seeing the lack of response, who are now creating and using AI and other means, but trying to counter on the internet. We've got to beat them using the tools that they're using against us.
Yeah, no question about it. Should people work on the assumption that before Pesach there will not be a normal travel schedule to Israel? Or we just don't know?
I wouldn't venture into that, knowing how sensitive this is for a lot of people.
Well, I could name, unfortunately, I can name tens of people I've already heard who've canceled for Pesach.
Yes, there are people who canceled who could still resurrect it, but I think that Israel will try to open up by Pesach. People are afraid. They're afraid of getting stuck. They hear all these stories that people, what's the worst thing? You get stuck for 2 or 3 days more in Israel, unless you have something that you have to come back for.
Right.
It's not the terrible thing. And I know that El Al is bringing back people. I think they brought back 20,000 already. There are about 100,000 people who want to get back to Israel. Unfortunately, they're not flying out with people yet, but Arkia announced that they would be flying from Taba. We'll have to see how those things work. I think people should be very careful. And if you have family members who want to drive to go to other countries, just be very careful. Know exactly what, and that it's authorized and that there's proper security in the places that they're going to. It's too easy to think that the Iranians would want to kidnap or capture a group of Jews leaving Israel or traveling. They've done it in the past, and they would do it.
And they have plenty of sympathizers who would jump at the opportunity.
Exactly. So people should just be careful. I understand the frustration level builds, and I understand that people want to get out, and people have successfully done it. I spoke to a guy yesterday who had been with us in Israel and stayed on afterwards. And he went to Taba with his daughter. Then he flew to Cairo. Then he flew to Frankfurt, and from Frankfurt to someplace into Washington. And I think it was a three-day flight because he had to do overnights on the way. So when you're really devoted and you want to do it, I guess you can do it. But people should just be careful. Just think twice before you take an adventurous route. People have successfully done it. I hope, God willing, everybody will, and everybody will be safe. But I have to believe that by Pesach, we'll at least be able to look. They're flying out of Ben Gurion. Nobody thought it would open up in a few days.
Right. I'll tell you, interesting times, to say the least. Interesting times continue to Folks, continue to monitor the news and continue to pray to the one above, because he, of course, is in charge of it all. Malcolm, thanks so much for joining us. Have a wonderful Shabbos. We'll speak, please, God, next week.
Have a good Shabbos, and you're right, everybody. Make sure they say Tehillim in all the shuls. This is not, we need all the armament that we have, both spiritual and physical, in this battle.
Yeah, recognize the miracle and pray for the next miracle. My thanks to Malcolm Hoenlein. Weekly update, Fridays, 7:40 a.m. Eastern Time here at JM in the AM.